Jack Fletcher's alarm blared at precisely 6:30 a.m., just as it had every weekday for the past 7 years. He groaned, slapping at his nightstand with the precision of a man who had developed a particular talent for silencing electronic devices without opening his eyes. Another thrilling day at the Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs, he mumbled to his empty apartment. Wonder if the aliens will call today. It was the same joke he made every morning. The Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs, or DEA, not to be confused with the Drug Enforcement Administration, though that mix-up happened at least twice a week, was widely regarded as the government's most elaborate practical joke. Created during a brief period of UFO hysteria in the early 2000s, the department had survived numerous budget cuts primarily because no politician wanted to be the one who eliminated it right before aliens actually showed up. Jack showered, dressed in his regulation government-approved business casual attire, khakis that were neither too beige nor too brown, and a button-up shirt that screamed, "I have given up on life but still iron my clothes," and headed to his car. His commute was the usual symphony of honking horns and talk radio hosts arguing about whether the latest celebrity scandal was proof of a lizard people conspiracy. Jack sipped his coffee and decided that if lizard people existed, they probably had better things to do than infiltrate reality television. The DEA office occupied half of the 7th floor in a nondescript government building. The other half belonged to the Department of Redundancy Department, which Jack suspected was another bureaucratic joke that had somehow become real. "Morning, Gladys," Jack nodded to the elderly receptionist who had been manning the front desk since before Jack was born. Some said she was the original point of contact appointed by President Truman after the Roswell incident. Jack suspected she just enjoyed having a job where she could knit uninterrupted for hours. "Morning, Jack." "No aliens called yet," Gladys replied without looking up from her knitting. "Day's still young," Jack quipped, heading to his office, a glorified closet with a window that overlooked the parking lot. His job primarily consisted of filing reports about civilian UFO sightings, most of which could be attributed to weather balloons, experimental aircraft, or people who had consumed questionable substances at desert music festivals. At precisely 10:17 a.m., as Jack was filling out his weekly resource allocation form, which primarily involved justifying why the department needed both coffee and tea in the break room, his phone rang. Jack picked up the receiver. "Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs, Jack Fletcher speaking. How may I help you?" "Eh?" The voice on the other end was unlike anything Jack had ever heard. It was simultaneously melodic and grating, as if someone had taught a cheese grater to sing opera. "Greetings, human bureaucratic entity. This is High Commander Zorn of the Kraxian Dominion. We have established orbit around your primitive celestial body, and will be commencing benevolent subjugation protocols in precisely 72 of your Earth hours. Please inform your planetary leaders." Jack stared at his half-completed form, then at his coffee mug that read, "I want to believe," an office Secret Santa gift that he'd found tragically ironic until this very moment. "Is this Derek from accounting? I told you I'd get the quarterly reports in by Friday." "I am not this Derek of accounting. I am High Commander Zorn of the Kraxian Dominion. Our warships have cloaked themselves in your upper atmosphere. Resistance is inadvisable. Submission is the logical choice." Jack looked out his window. The sky appeared normal, though he wasn't sure what an alien invasion was supposed to look like. More ominous clouds, perhaps? He'd always imagined more ominous clouds. "Could you hold for a moment, please?" Jack pressed the hold button without waiting for a response, and immediately dialed his supervisor's extension. "Sir, I think we might have actual aliens on line 1. His supervisor, Martin Greaves, a man who had perfected the art of looking busy while doing absolutely nothing, laughed. "Good one, Fletcher. Did Gladys put you up to this?" "No, sir, I'm serious. They say they're the Kraxian Dominion and they're here to subjugate us. Benevolently. Malevolently. Right? And I'm the Queen of England. Put them through to my office. Let's hear this prank call." 5 minutes later, the entire office was gathered around Martin's speakerphone, listening to High Commander Zorn explain in excruciating detail how the Kraxian Dominion had been observing Earth for centuries and had finally decided humans were ready to join their intergalactic empire as a Level 3 servitor species. "What does Level 3 mean?" Jack whispered to his colleague. "I think it means we're 3 steps above pets but 2 steps below actual people," she whispered back. As if to prove they weren't joking, the Kraxians temporarily disabled Earth's satellite communications and projected a massive hologram of their fleet above every major city on the planet. The ships resembled giant metallic octopi, if octopi were designed by architects with a fondness for chrome and unnecessary spikes. And just like that, Jack Fletcher's catastrophically normal day had become the least normal day in human history. Within 3 hours of first contact, the United Nations had convened an emergency session. Due to the Kraxians' interference with satellite communications, it was held via a hastily arranged video conference that looked like a chaotic family Zoom call, where half the participants didn't know how to unmute themselves. Jack, who should have been nowhere near this level of global crisis management, found himself sitting in a secure conference room in the Pentagon, because somebody had misread Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs as Department of Extraterrestrial Experts. By the time anyone realized the mistake, the Kraxians had specifically requested the presence of the human designated Fletcher as their initial point of contact. "So you're the alien guy," said a sharp-voiced woman who dropped into the chair beside him. "I expected someone taller." "I'm not the alien guy," Jack protested weakly. "I'm the guy who files reports about drunk people seeing weird lights in the sky." "Well, congratulations on your promotion." She extended her hand. "Dr. Eleanor Winters, Xenobiology. Everyone calls me Ellie, except people who want me to ignore them." Jack shook her hand, noting her firm grip and the calculating look in her eyes. "Jack Fletcher, bureaucrat. Everyone calls me Jack, except the barista at my local coffee shop who insists on calling me Jake despite the name being clearly written on my loyalty card." Ellie almost smiled. "The world's about to end, and you're worried about coffee shop name accuracy?" "The world's about to end, and you're worried about what to call a bureaucrat," Jack countered. "Macon?" Before she could respond, the massive screen at the front of the room flickered to life, revealing a creature that looked like the unholy offspring of a praying mantis in a business suit. Its exoskeleton was a sleek bluish gray, and it wore what appeared to be decorative metal plates across its thorax. "Greetings, Earth Leadership Consortium. I am Ambassador Zorn of the Kraxian Dominion. We have chosen to address you directly rather than waste time with your fractious global governance structures." The Secretary General of the UN cleared his throat. "On behalf of Earth, I welcome you and—" "Your welcome is irrelevant," Zorn interrupted. "We do not require your approval to proceed. The Kraxian Dominion has determined that Earth is suitable for integration into our empire. You will be permitted to maintain limited autonomy while benefiting from our superior technology and civilization." "And if we decline this generous offer?" asked the U.S. President, her voice tense. Zorn's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Decline? That would be most illogical. But to satisfy your primitive need for complete information, declining would result in immediate planetary sterilization. We find it more efficient to eliminate species that cannot recognize the obvious benefits of our rule." A stunned silence fell over the room. "You have 72 of your hours to formally submit. We will accept your surrender through your representative, the human designated Fletcher." Zorn's compound eyes seemed to focus on Jack. "We selected you because your records indicate you are the least ambitious human in your department. You are unlikely to complicate the process with aspirations of personal advancement." The screen went dark, leaving the room in shocked silence. The Secretary of Defense was the first to speak. "Who the hell is Fletcher?" Jack raised his hand slightly. "That would be me, sir." Every head in the room turned toward him. "And you're qualified to handle first contact because—" the Secretary prompted. "I'm not," Jack admitted. "I file paperwork about UFO sightings, most of which turn out to be weather balloons or experimental aircraft or people who've had too much to drink at desert music festivals." "Perfect," muttered the President. The fate of humanity rests in the hands of a man who files reports about drunk people seeing weird lights. To be fair, Ellie interjected, the aliens chose him precisely because they don't see him as a threat that could be useful. The president sighed. Fine. Fletcher, you're now Earth's official ambassador to the Kraxian Dominion. Dr. Winters, you'll advise him. And someone get Commander Thornton in here. If we're going to face annihilation, I want our best tactical mind at the table. Jack turned to Ellie. So do I get business cards with Earth's official ambassador to the alien invasion on them? Or is that something I need to expense through my department? Commander Rex Thornton arrived exactly 37 minutes later, striding into the room with the confident gait of a man who had never doubted a decision in his life. His military uniform was adorned with so many medals it made a soft jingling sound as he moved, like a very patriotic wind chime. Status report, he barked, apparently uninterested in introductions. Jack opened his mouth to respond, but Ellie beat him to it. Aliens called. They want Earth. We have 3 days to surrender or die. Jack here is our designated negotiator because the aliens think he's too unambitious to cause trouble. Thornton stared at Jack with the intensity of a man evaluating a particularly disappointing sandwich. You're our negotiator? Not by choice, Jack clarified. I was just doing my job, which until today involved precisely 0 actual aliens. Your job now involves preventing the extinction of humanity, Thornton declared, as if assigning Jack a routine patrol duty. So what's our plan? For the next 2 hours, the room cycled through increasingly desperate strategies. Military options were quickly dismissed. The Kraxian ships were positioned beyond the reach of Earth's most advanced weapons, and their technology was clearly centuries ahead of humanity's. Diplomatic solutions seemed equally futile. The Kraxians had made it clear they were not interested in negotiation, only submission. What about their biology? Jack asked during a brief lull in the increasingly panicked discussion. Do we know anything about them that might give us an advantage? All eyes turned to Ellie, who had been unusually quiet for the past 30 minutes, her focus entirely on her tablet. Actually, she said, looking up, I've been analyzing the transmission data from our conversation with Ambassador Zorn, and I've found something interesting. She swiped her tablet screen, sending images to the main display. Their neural patterns show unusual fluctuations when processing certain types of information. The screen showed a series of wavelength patterns that meant absolutely nothing to Jack. In English, Dr. Thornton demanded. They're hyperlogical, Ellie explained. Their brains appear to be optimized for processing linear, rational information. But when exposed to concepts that defy logic, absurdity, paradox, certain types of humor, their neural pathways show signs of stress. So they can't take a joke? Jack asked. It's more than that, Ellie said, warming to the subject. Their entire evolutionary path is optimized for logical efficiency. Based on these readings, I theorize that exposure to enough illogical or absurd content could actually cause their neural networks to crash like a computer faced with a division by 0 error. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Are you suggesting, the Secretary of Defense said slowly, that we could defeat an advanced alien civilization with what? Dad jokes. Not just dad jokes, Ellie replied, but human absurdity in general. Memes, surrealist art, reality television. The fact that we have dozens of words for throwing things but use run for everything from jogging to managing a company. Jack felt a smile spreading across his face. So we weaponize human weirdness? Precisely, Ellie nodded. The Kraxians have likely never encountered a species that embraces contradiction and absurdity the way humans do. It could be our greatest advantage. Commander Thornton looked like he was suffering from his own neural crash. This is ridiculous. You want to defeat an alien invasion with internet jokes and puns? Do you have a better plan? Ellie challenged. Thornton's silence was answer enough. Besides, Jack added, they specifically chose me because I'm unambitious and non-threatening. They won't be expecting Earth's ambassador to launch a psychological warfare campaign. The president, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. Dr. Winters, what's the probability of success for this approach? Ellie hesitated. Based on the limited data we have, maybe 30%. But that's 30% more than any military option currently on the table. 30% chance of saving humanity by confusing aliens to death, the president mused. I've approved missions with worse odds. She straightened in her chair. Operation Cosmic Punchline is a go. God help us all. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of activity that Jack could only describe as organized chaos. The Pentagon's most secure server room had been transformed into what Commander Thornton derisively called the meme war room, where analysts combed through decades of internet culture, comedy, and human absurdity to compile the most potent weapons for their psychological arsenal. No, we can't use that one, Ellie said, rejecting an image on one of the screens. The logical inconsistency isn't strong enough. We need content that creates maximum cognitive dissonance. Jack watched as military personnel debated the relative merits of dadaist art versus surrealist memes with the seriousness of generals planning a land invasion. In one corner, a Navy SEAL was practicing the delivery of "Why did the chicken cross the road?" jokes with the intensity usually reserved for disarming bombs. Fletcher. Thornton's voice cut through the room. Training time. Jack found himself in a smaller room where Thornton stood next to a whiteboard covered in diagrams that looked suspiciously like football plays. Dr. Winters believes the initial contact should exploit the Kraxians' inability to process humor, particularly humor that subverts expectations, Thornton explained, by pointing to the board. You'll start with level 1 jokes, simple puns, knock-knock jokes to assess their tolerance. Then escalate to level 2 dad jokes and logical paradoxes. If they're still functioning, hit them with level 3 abstract memes and examples of human behavior that defy logical explanation. Jack stared at the commander. You've diagrammed comedy as a military strategy. Is that a problem, Fletcher? No, sir. It's just possibly the funniest thing about this entire situation. For the next several hours, Jack was drilled on joke delivery, timing, and the strategic deployment of absurdist concepts. By the end, his head was spinning, but he had to admit that Thornton's methodical approach had merit. Remember, Thornton said as they concluded, this isn't about being funny. It's about exploiting an enemy weakness. Treat these jokes like weapons, because that's what they are. Yes, sir, Jack replied. Permission to say something, sir? Granted. Granted. If we save the world with "Why did the chicken cross the road?" I'm putting that on my resume. The faintest hint of a smile crossed Thornton's face. If we save the world, Fletcher, I'll write the recommendation letter myself. At precisely 48 hours into the Kraxians' 72-hour ultimatum, Jack found himself in a specially prepared conference room, waiting for his first face-to-face meeting with a Kraxian representative. Ellie sat beside him, while Thornton watched from an adjacent room with a tactical team. Remember, Ellie whispered, start subtle. We need to establish a baseline for their reactions before going full absurdist. A shimmer of light in the center of the room coalesced into the form of Captain Draz, a Kraxian officer whose exoskeleton bore fewer decorative plates than Ambassador Zorn's, but who carried himself with the same air of superiority. Human Fletcher, Draz acknowledged with a slight incline of his insectoid head. I have been dispatched to receive your species' formal surrender and initiate the integration protocols. Jack stood, extending his hand in greeting. Captain Draz, thank you for coming. Before we discuss surrender terms, I thought we might get to know each other a bit. After all, we're going to be working together. Draz regarded Jack's hand with obvious confusion but made no move to reciprocate the gesture. Social preliminaries are inefficient. We should proceed directly to the surrender documentation. Actually, Jack said, pulling his hand back on Earth, it's customary to exchange jokes before any major diplomatic agreement. It's how we assess compatibility. Jokes? Draz's mandibles clicked rapidly. Ah, your primitive humor constructs. If this ritual is necessary, you may proceed. Jack smiled. Why did the scarecrow win an award? Draz's compound eyes fixed on Jack. Scarecrows are inanimate agricultural tools designed to deter avian pests. They cannot win awards. Because he was outstanding in his field, Jack delivered the punchline with perfect timing. Draz's antennae twitched. This statement contains a deliberate misconstruction of the word outstanding. It simultaneously implies physical positioning and exceptional quality. This is illogical. That's what makes it funny, Jack explained. The dual meaning creates surprise, which humans find pleasurable. Inefficient communication is pleasurable? Draz's voice had taken on a slightly higher pitch. This is contrary to optimal information exchange. Jack glanced at Ellie, who gave him a subtle nod to continue. Let me try another one, Jack said. What's the difference between a poorly dressed man on a trampoline and a well-dressed man on a trampoline? Draz seemed to struggle with the premise. The difference would be their attire. This is self-evident in your question. One is a jumpsuit, and the other is a suit that jumps, Jack delivered with a straight face. This time Draz's entire body went rigid. His mandibles clicked rapidly, and a faint whirring sound emanated from somewhere inside his exoskeleton. This is deliberately confusing wordplay. It serves no communicative purpose. Draz's antennae were now vibrating visibly. I must consult with high command about these unexpected linguistic complications. Before Jack or Ellie could respond, Draz's form shimmered and disappeared. In the silence that followed, Ellie turned to Jack with a growing smile. It's working. Their neural pathways are showing significant stress responses to even basic wordplay. So what's next? Jack asked. Next, Ellie replied, we prepare for their return with something even more powerful. Jack raised an eyebrow. More powerful than dad jokes? Much more powerful, Ellie confirmed. We're going to introduce them to internet memes. The Kraxians returned 12 hours later, but with a modification that Jack hadn't anticipated. Ambassador Zorn himself materialized in the conference room, accompanied by Captain Draz and a third Kraxian wearing what appeared to be some kind of technical apparatus attached to its exoskeleton. Human Fletcher, Zorn began without preamble. Your attempt to disrupt our neural processing through linguistic ambiguity has been noted and countered. We have installed logic filters to protect our cognitive functions from your primitive semantic attacks. The third Kraxian stepped forward. I am Chief Technician Korv. My linguistic harmonizer will translate your statements into logical constructs before they reach our neural pathways. Jack exchanged a concerned glance with Ellie. Their plan had been discovered and countered more quickly than they'd anticipated. Ambassador Zorn, Jack said, maintaining his composure, I apologize if our customs caused any distress. Perhaps we could try a different approach to building understanding between our species. There is nothing to understand, Zorn replied dismissively. You will submit or be eliminated. This meeting is merely a formality to receive your surrender before the deadline expires. Jack noticed that despite their confident words, all three Kraxians maintained a greater distance from him than Draz had during their first meeting. They were wary now, which meant their defenses weren't as solid as they claimed. Would you like some coffee while we discuss the terms? Jack gestured to the carafe on the conference table. It's a customary offering during Earth negotiations. The Kraxians' antennae twitched in unison, a gesture Jack had come to recognize as suspicion. Your biological stimulants are irrelevant to us, Zorn declared. Of course, Jack nodded, reaching for the carafe anyway. More for me then. As he poured himself a cup, Jack deliberately allowed his hand to slip, sending hot coffee cascading across the table. Oh no, he exclaimed with exaggerated dismay. I spilled it. Quick, someone get a fork. The effect was immediate. All three Kraxians froze, their antennae rigid. A fork? Korv's voice was strained. That utensil would be ineffective for liquid absorption. Of course it would, Jack agreed. That's why I need 7 of them, arranged in a circle. Zorn's mandibles began clicking rapidly. Your statement violates basic causal logic. The linguistic harmonizer cannot parse this nonsensical request. Jack pressed his advantage. While you're getting those forks, could you also bring me a left-handed screwdriver? I'm right-handed, but it's Wednesday. The technical apparatus on Korv's exoskeleton began emitting a high-pitched whine. Left-handed screwdriver? This tool distinction does not exist. And manual dexterity preference has no logical correlation with your planet's rotational calendar designations. Ellie, catching on, joined in. Actually, Ambassador, humans alter our dominant hand based on the day of the week. Didn't your research tell you that? On Mondays it's thumbs only. The whining from Korv's device increased in pitch. Smoke began seeping from between the seams of the apparatus. This is deliberate misinformation, Zorn accused, his voice less steady than before. You are attempting to confuse our logic circuits. Confuse? No, Jack said with a wave of his hand. I'm just trying to explain how things work on Earth. For instance, did you know that on our planet, the color blue tastes like Tuesdays? Korv's device exploded in a shower of sparks, causing the technician to stumble backward. Impossible. Colors cannot have gustatory properties. Days cannot be tasted. Tell that to people with synesthesia, Ellie countered smoothly. Synesthesia is a neural condition affecting only a small percentage of your species. Raz protested. It cannot be generalized to all humans. Jack leaned forward. But have you considered that maybe Tuesday isn't a day at all? Maybe it's just a state of mind. Zorn raised his upper limbs in what appeared to be a defensive posture. This conversation is terminated. We will return at the deadline for your surrender. Any further attempts at neural disruption will result in immediate planetary sterilization. The three Kraxians shimmered and disappeared, leaving behind only the smoking remains of Korv's failed linguistic harmonizer. In the silence that followed, Commander Thornton entered the room, his expression uncharacteristically impressed. What in God's name did you two just do? He asked. We exploited a weakness, Jack answered. Their entire society is built on logic and order. They can't comprehend or process ideas that don't fit into those neat categories. And humans, Ellie added with a growing smile, are champions at creating and embracing the illogical. So what's our next move? Thornton asked. They know what we're doing now. Jack exchanged a glance with Ellie. We need to go bigger. Much bigger. I've been working on something, Ellie admitted. A quantum meme generator that creates cascading layers of contextual absurdity. It's like a logic bomb, but based on the most incomprehensible aspects of human internet culture. Will it work? Thornton asked. Against their minds? Ellie shrugged. I have no idea. But against their technology? Definitely. Their systems are designed to process information logically. Hit them with enough illogical content simultaneously, and their entire network could crash. Jack nodded slowly. And if their ships are as integrated with their neural networks as we suspect, then we might just have a chance, Ellie finished. Thornton looked between them. I never thought I'd say this, but the fate of humanity now rests on our ability to shitpost an alien invasion into submission. The final hours before the Kraxian deadline were a flurry of activity. Ellie's quantum meme generator, a device that looked suspiciously like a laptop covered in Christmas lights and duct tape, was tested and loaded with the most incomprehensible human content the team could compile. Are you sure this will work? Jack asked as Ellie made her final adjustments. No, she admitted. But our alternatives are surrender or extinction, so I'm feeling pretty good about our odds. Commander Thornton approached, his face grim. The Kraxian mothership has just entered low Earth orbit. They're positioning themselves directly above us. They're not taking any chances this time, Jack noted. They want to be close enough to vaporize us the moment their deadline expires. Or Ellie countered, they've just moved into perfect range for our counterattack. The plan was desperate, but elegant in its simplicity. Instead of waiting for the Kraxians to contact them, they would request passage to the mothership under the pretense of delivering Earth's formal surrender. Once aboard, they would deploy Ellie's device, exposing the ship's central systems to a concentrated dose of human absurdity. Remember, Thornton instructed as they prepared to transmit their request, your only objective is to get that device to their central processing core. No heroics, no improvisation. Get in, deploy, get out. Jack nodded. Permission to improvise if absolutely necessary, sir. Thornton's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened slightly. Granted, Fletcher. But only if absolutely necessary. 30 minutes later, Jack and Ellie materialized aboard the Kraxian mothership, escorted by a visibly wary Captain Draz. Supreme Commander Vrax has agreed to accept your surrender personally, Draz informed them, maintaining a careful distance. This is an unprecedented honor. We're very honored, Jack assured him, clutching the diplomatic case that contained both the fake surrender documents and Ellie's disguised device. Earth understands its place in the grand scheme of things. The interior of the mothership was a marvel of efficiency and logic. Every corridor met at perfect right angles. Every door was exactly the same size and shape. Even the lighting was precisely calibrated to provide optimal illumination without a single shadow. Your species values uniformity, Ellie observed as they walked. Efficiency, Draz corrected. Variation without purpose is wasteful. Is that why all of you have names that are a single syllable ending in a consonant? Jack asked innocently. Draz's step faltered momentarily. Our designation system is optimized for clarity and brevity. Fascinating, Jack nodded. On Earth, some people have names that are over 20 syllables long, and others are just named after the sound a cat makes when you step on its tail. Draz's antennae twitched violently, but he said nothing as he led them into what was obviously the ship's command center. Dozens of Kraxians operated various stations around a central platform where a larger Kraxian with elaborately decorated exoskeleton plates stood. Supreme Commander, Draz announced, the human representatives have arrived with their surrender documentation. Vrax turned to face them, his compound eyes gleaming in the perfect lighting. Human Fletcher. I have reviewed the reports of your attempts to disrupt our neural functions. Ingenious, but ultimately futile. Your species' capacity for illogical thought is precisely why you require our guidance. Jack stepped forward, opening the diplomatic case. Supreme Commander, on behalf of Earth, I present our formal response to your ultimatum. Excellent, Vrax's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. Place it on the central interface. Jack carefully placed Ellie's device on the indicated platform. As expected, the Kraxians had scanned it for conventional weapons but had failed to recognize the nature of its true payload. Before we activate the transfer, Jack said, there's something you should understand about humans. Vrax's posture indicated mild annoyance. Your explanations are unnecessary. We have studied your species extensively. Then you know about social media? Jack asked. Primitive digital communication networks, Vrax dismissed with a wave of his upper limb. And reality television? Ellie added. Manufactured conflict scenarios for entertainment purposes, Draz supplied. Inefficient use of resources. Jack nodded thoughtfully. And have you analyzed why humans enjoy these things? Why we spend hours watching people we don't know argue about problems that don't matter while eating food prepared by celebrity chefs who are famous only because they yell at other chefs who want to be famous for yelling at chefs? The command center had gone very quiet. Every Kraxian had turned to stare at Jack. Or why? Ellie continued smoothly. Humans will debate for hours about whether a hot dog is a sandwich, or if cereal is a soup, or which direction a dog would wear pants if dogs wore pants. Vrax's antennae were now vibrating visibly. These are meaningless discussions. Exactly, Jack exclaimed. And we love them. We thrive on them. Humans will spend more time arguing about fictional characters' romantic relationships than discussing our actual governmental policies. With a subtle movement, Ellie activated the device. A holographic projection sprang to life, displaying a rapid-fire sequence of memes. viral videos, an internet phenomena that had confounded rational explanation for decades. "What is this?" Vrax demanded, his voice rising in pitch. This, Jack explained calmly, is humanity. Unfiltered, unlogical, and unashamed. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Across the command center, Kraxians began to twitch and stammer as their neural pathways tried and failed to process the bombardment of absurdity. The ship's systems, linked to their neural networks, began to flicker and fail. "Make it stop," Vrax commanded, his previously commanding voice now strained. "We can't," Ellie said. "Once initiated, the sequence must complete." As the Kraxians' distress grew, Jack stepped closer to Vrax. "Here's the thing, Supreme Commander. Humans don't make sense. We never have. We're a species that invented thousands of religions, then fought wars over which one was correct. We created art that deliberately looks nothing like what it represents. We spend years of our lives watching staged competitions between people playing games we invented." And, Ellie added, "We're the only species known to deliberately seek out spicy food plants that evolved capsaicin specifically to prevent animals from eating them, and then we compete to see who can eat the spiciest version without crying." The mothership's lights began to flicker as the central system struggled to maintain control. "You can't conquer us," Jack continued, raising his voice over the growing chaos. "Not because we're stronger or smarter, but because we don't make sense. Your entire civilization is built on logic and order. Ours thrives in chaos and contradiction. You can't subjugate what you fundamentally cannot understand." With a sound like 1,000 computers simultaneously blue screening, the command center systems shut down. Emergency lights flickered on as Vrax slumped against the central platform. "Enough," the Supreme Commander wheezed. "We withdraw our claim to this planet." "You're surrendering?" Jack couldn't keep the surprise from his voice. "Not surrendering," Vrax corrected weakly. "Quarantining. Your species represents a cognitive hazard too dangerous to incorporate into the Dominion. Earth will be designated a prohibited zone. No Kraxian will ever approach your system again." Jack exchanged a glance with Ellie, who was trying and failing to suppress a smile. "We accept these terms," Jack said formally. "Earth will respect your decision to never, ever bother us again." 3 days after the Kraxian fleet had departed, setting what must have been a galactic record for him, fastest retreat in military history, Jack found himself back in his office at the Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs. Except now, instead of a glorified closet with a sputtering coffee machine, it was a spacious corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Washington Monument. "Comfortable?" Ellie asked, leaning against the doorframe with 2 steaming mugs in hand. "I'm still getting used to people actually returning my calls," Jack admitted, accepting the coffee she offered. "Yesterday the president called just to ask how I was doing." "Well, you did help save humanity from alien domination," Ellie said, settling into one of the plush visitor chairs. "That tends to raise one's profile in government circles." Jack spun his chair to face the window. "You know what's funny? If the Kraxians had just asked nicely, we probably would have shared our science, our art, maybe even our memes." "That's the paradox they couldn't compute." Ellie nodded. "We're simultaneously the species that invented nuclear weapons and the species that created cat videos. We're capable of astonishing cruelty and breathtaking compassion, often within the same day." "Speaking of paradoxes," Jack turned back to her, "what's happening with your quantum meme generator?" Ellie winced. "The Pentagon wants to weaponize it. DARPA's already calling it the Cognitive Disruption Array. I told them it was a one-off prototype, but they don't believe that someone built a device capable of shorting out an advanced alien neural network using fairy lights and duct tape." "Exactly." Jack's new secure phone buzzed. The display showed Commander Thornton's name. "Excuse me," he said, answering the call. "Fletcher here." "We've detected an incoming transmission," Thornton said without preamble. "Non-Kraxian origin. They identified themselves as the Galactic Cooperative of Sentient Species and say they've been monitoring the situation." Jack felt his newly won relaxation evaporate. Are they hostile? Unclear, Thornton replied. But their message contains what appears to be an invitation. An invitation to what? Jack asked, already reaching for his jacket. That's just it, Thornton said, and Jack could hear the rare note of bewilderment in the commander's voice. They want to invite Earth to join their coalition. Apparently, we're the first species in recorded history to successfully repel a Kraxian invasion force. Ellie, who had been pretending not to eavesdrop, raised her eyebrows questioningly. Jack gave her a quick thumbs up. Tell them we'd be delighted to receive their representatives, Jack said. And Commander? Let's make sure the welcome committee includes our best meme-lords. Just in case. As he hung up, Jack couldn't help but smile. Humanity's first steps into the wider galactic community would be awkward, chaotic, and probably involve explaining why humans deliberately frightened themselves for entertainment, or why they sometimes spoke entirely in movie quotes. Ready for round 2? Ellie asked, already pulling up schematics on her tablet. Not really, Jack admitted. But that's humanity's superpower, isn't it? We're never actually ready for anything, but we muddle through anyway. Outside his window, life in Washington, D.C. continued as normal. People hurried to meetings, argued about politics, fell in love, broke up, created art, and debated whether pineapple belonged on pizza, all blissfully unaware that their irrational, contradictory, beautiful human nature had just saved the world. And somewhere in deep space, a Kraxian ship was placing warning beacons around the solar system, carrying a simple message to any logical species that might pass by. Danger. Cognitive hazard. Earth quarantine zone. Approach at your own risk. Commander Vrax, still recovering from neural shock, had been right about one thing: Earth would never be conquered by the Kraxians. But he'd been wrong about the reason. It wasn't that humans couldn't be understood, it was that understanding humans required something the Kraxians had engineered out of their society generations ago. The ability to embrace contradiction, to find meaning in absurdity, and to laugh at the cosmic joke of existence. As Jack looked at the newly delivered plaque on his desk, Jack Fletcher, Earth's first ambassador to the stars, he couldn't help but wonder what other alien civilizations would make of humanity. Would they be fascinated by our paradoxes or terrified by our unpredictability? Either way, humanity was about to make its grand entrance onto the galactic stage, armed with nothing but its boundless creativity, its inexplicable customs, and its absolute refusal to make consistent, logical sense. And somehow Jack suspected that would be enough.